You're listening to P&P Pals, Tabletop Role-playing Radio Theatre. Their task finished, Retribution, Leon, and Melba leave the frigid lake and snowy fields behind. A peculiar little surprise awaits them.
Unaccountably, a building has risen from the field outside the communal hall. It's formed from smooth, mostly regular bricks of snow, held fast by a frosty mortar. One half of the structure is squat and roughly squared, the walls gradually pinching into a messy, lopsided roof. Adjoined is an incomplete, open-topped tower, standing roughly 4.5 feet tall. Small voices can be heard talking and laughing inside. On approach, Melba sweetly calls out,
"My, you've all been busy, haven't you?"
She and Leon are surprised when a disheveled young woman stands in the center of the tower, her chest rising just above its highest bricks. The woman sweeps her hands nervously through her messy blonde hair. Leon should know her immediately, but the absurdity of the situation has rendered her unrecognizable.
Yes. We've been very busy since the northeastern buttress collapsed. Janice had to repack nearly all its bricks. Something of a production panic ensued. Is my son in there somewhere? Oh, you're Reese's mother. I'm Anise.
She awkwardly extends a hand over the wall, down to the halfling.
Melba takes hold of it with both of her own.
Come to think of it, I saw you with the girls at breakfast. It's a pleasure to meet you properly, Anise. Thank you. Reese is in the keep.
Anise motions broadly to the misshapen igloo on her left.
He's negotiating with Absinthe and Janice for access to the untouched snowfield along the lake's shore, but they'd rather it be preserved.
At that, Absinthe calls out,
"Our one window will be a complete waste if we make a mess of that field."
Anise nods gravely.
It would be something of a waste.
By now, Retribution has taken several steps away from the others. Her shoulders heave with barely constrained laughter. It's a hard fight, but she reins it in. Anise, I have my suspicions, but what are you doing in there? With only one inescapable path before her, Anise begins to blush preemptively. Her gaze wanders off from Retribution's.
They wanted my help smoothing the seams between the bricks.
Reasonable enough. Why are you still in there, though? The young mage turns her face down, trying to cover the deep red of it with a hand held to her forehead.
The exit is too small. My attention was elsewhere when they built it, and it's too small.
Retribution's laughter can be fought no longer. It bounds about, echoing across the lake and valley, made all the more rambunctious for having been restrained.
Melba laughs too, familiar as she is with children's kind-hearted traps. Even Leon chuckles a little, but his eyes are sympathetic.
Retribution, please. I'm being held captive in an icy prison that I helped to build, and can't bring myself to topple. Don't laugh.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll help. I just need a moment to collect myself. Did you three uncover anything concerning the missing supplies? Eyes flashing wide, Anise exclaims,
We did. It's quite serious. I'm sorry I didn't mention it straight away. Mr. Grimrock and Franz stand guard over it as we speak.
Retribution works her jaw for a second. Then, stand guard. I see. Let's get you out of there, then. You can brief me on the way. Elbows up, if you would. Raising both arms to one side of her head, Anise buries her still flush face in the crook of an elbow. Retribution lifts her onto a shoulder, easy as a bag of loosely packed straw. She's up, over the wall, and down again in the space of a breath.
Absinthe and Janice's hands appear, waving over the lip of the tower.
"Bye, Anise. Thanks for your help."
You are welcome,
She says, staggering slightly.
"What's that?" "Oh yeah. Reese wants you to know that he's waving too."
The flock of waving hands retreats into the safety of their tower.
"Does Reese have to go home now?"
Oh,
Not necessarily. That's good. I've talked him down to limited access to the eastern fields, if he tells me where he and Janice keep going for all these icicles.
Only now, trying to stay ahead of Retribution's long gait, does Anise begin to appreciate her new boots. The cold might not reach her, but it would certainly have left her paper-thin slippers frozen and abrasive. Besides that, the warmth of cloth and leather is much preferred over lukewarm nothingness.
I'd like to apologize again for not mentioning something so serious straight away.
I can't hold it against you, Anise. You were in a compromising situation, being taken hostage by children. I'm just glad you escaped with your life.
All right. To the subject at hand, we found the entrance to a tunnel dug beneath workshop Berry Bramble.
Berry Bramble? That's adorable.
It is. The hole was hidden under a basket in a corner. In addition, we found a series of small footprints in the workshop's halls. Ron and Gren both suppose they belong to one or more goblins.
That's a bold little heist. Something about it strikes me as odd.
In what way?
Don't you think it's strange that they'd have the skill to burrow around, steal in undetected, but then leave such a clear clue right at the end?
Well, it could be they didn't expect to be followed, even if signs of their passage were found. Thought of that way, operating cautiously would only be important at the start. It would just waste time if carried on through to the end.
Time spent on a job well done is never wasted, Anise. You don't fudge the bandage just because you've expertly sewn the sutures, right? I mean, right, because I'll need to find a different surgeon if that's the case.
I would never fudge any part of a procedure, thank you. Maybe their objective from the start was solely acquisition, regardless of consequence? I wonder what might have happened had they been found out sooner.
It seems to me they were acting under some kind of time pressure. It's probably best not to speculate further. I'm a minute's pondering away from a beleaguered goblin grandmother.
Inside the workshop, a potter has commanded the mouth of the tunnel closed with some elementary geokinesis. Meanwhile, two masons work to squarely chisel away some of the stone floor nearby. Gren and Franz stand close, just in case the work stirs something up.
Has Auntie been apprised of the situation?
Newton steps forward, dabbing at his forehead and cheek with a kerchief.
Yes, ma'am. I told her that we would resolve it on our own. She thinks that we're just working on getting the hole filled. Yeah, that's not untrue. That will just be the end of this process. I need to do some looking around first. As I interpret our agreement, we were supposed to determine the location of your stolen materials. I've decided somewhere down a hole is not a sufficiently precise determination.
The thin man nods. He looks a little sick.
Anise, Fran, you two will come with me. Additionally, I'd greatly appreciate the company of whichever one of you can so freely manipulate the earth. She gestures to the assembled spellcasters. Gren, stand watch over the hole. If half an hour passes and you have not heard from us, please come retrieve our bodies.
The dwarf cracks a smile at that, but Eldath's adherents grow tense and dour.
My apologies. Just a little dark, mercenary humor. I promise we'll flee before anyone is killed. We're just going to take a peek, really. For all we know, this tunnel could lead to a dozen others, and, with our numbers, the search will have to end there.
Her efforts do little to allay their anxieties.
Well, which of you can open the tunnel?
A halfling woman steps forward. She's shorter and older than Melba. Her jaw is set, and her eyes determined. Dragging a finger through the exposed earth, it parts, smooth as a well-oiled door swinging in.
Trembling, Anise struggles to light her lantern. She turns away from the others, stepping back into the pillar of light that streams down from the workshop. In her current state of mind, Anise knows she couldn't handle Fran sauntering over, casually lighting it for her. In all likelihood, she'd beat him with it.
There it is. I just needed a little light to light my light, I suppose. Just like kindling, really, if you think about it.
I suppose. We'll lead from the edge of the lantern's light. Retribution briefly explains a few hand signs, concluding with a contingency. You two are here to provide magical aid. You're not to engage anything in these tunnels in combat. If I give you the word, you are both to flee from the tunnels as quickly as you're able. Understand? The thought of abandoning Retribution or even Fran underground doesn't sit well with her, but Anise forces a weak nod.
Not even 40 feet from the landing, the tunnel constricts.
Retribution waves the Potter up with a sign.
Her small hand brushes the dirt aside, leaving a perfectly squared doorframe. 2, perhaps 3 minutes deeper underground, the narrow crevice opens into a miniature cavern. It's tall enough that Retribution could stand to her full height and holds a fine selection of lightly luminous mushrooms. Water drips from a stubby stalactite, pooling in a shallow bowl of sticky mud. At the far wall, a larger tunnel runs perpendicular to the one that brought them here.
Hey, look at that. We can manage, too. I don't know. Think you can narrow the field further? What, and cut the gambling outright? I'll take a look, but no complaints when everyone's fine and bored.
He moves down from a crouch, pressing an elbow into the soft ground. He studies the dirt closely, then mutters something to himself, shaking his head as if trying to drive off a hangover.
Hey, boss, can you have them bring that light up here? Retribution motions the other two up, then slides aside, letting the light pass.
Everyone sees what Fran found so curious almost at once. One needn't be a skilled tracker to spot the long, narrow ruts stamped over the familiar, bean-shaped tracks of humanoids. A cold, uncomfortable silence follows.
What do you imagine made those? I don't want to say. The only thing I can think of sounds stupid.
Personally, I would appreciate it if you said it anyway.
A 300-pound chicken. It looks like they had a little scuffle. These feet were moving fast, at least 3 different sets. Most of the tracks are headed this way.
He points up the eastern passage. In the wall nearby, an old rock yields to pressure and time. It rumbles out, startling the group.
That's enough of that, thank you. Gods damn, the earth betrays me. Cursing, she asks the Potter to seal the western tunnel. Please make it thin enough that a dire chicken could dig out in the spring. Not so thin that one could dig through while we're still down here.
Heading eastward, patches of dirt give way to rough stone. The path is open, but it bends back and forth, creating nightmarish blind spots. After a handful of such twists, Fran fumbles to stop Retribution. Something has caught his eye. Dim light dances off the uneven walls ahead. Even now, it's fading, receding deeper into the damp tunnels.
Keep an eye on them. She jerks her head toward Anise and the old Potter, then stalks down the twisting hall.
The light glows brighter as Retribution begins to close the distance. Her target is moving, but not quickly.
Are they cautious, or are they wounded? Her mind swings back to the tracks mid-step, and she stills as sure as the stone that surrounds her. Are there any chimera in this valley? Griffin, owlbear, anything like that? With a huff, she begins moving again, her pace hastened. Better to be close to someone if some monstrosity is lurking about.
The light has stopped moving. Peering around a corner, 4 small, green forms are heaped in a pile. It rises and falls with the steady rhythm of sleep. They're all still wearing travel packs, even huddled as they are. Moving further around the corner, a 5th can be seen. A lookout, leaning upright against the slick wall. It's a surprisingly dutiful lean, considering that this goblin is as deeply asleep as the other 4.
The situation may be dangerous, but Retribution can't help but indulge in a sly smile. The sight of a guard willing to sleep on the job, yet stalwart enough to do so standing up, strikes her as very funny. She closes the distance slowly, then springs like a great cat. Or, perhaps more accurately, an especially large, martially adept bat. She hooks it round the neck with an arm, then enfolds it in her wings, muffling the few small cries it can manage.
Whether from the chokehold, shock, or exhaustion, the goblin quickly loses consciousness.
Stepping calmly backwards, Retribution maneuvers down the tunnel, silently retreating from the goblin's lamplight. Rejoined with the others, Retribution wraps a length of rope around her new friend's hands and feet. It's inefficient, binding the goblin from wrist to elbow, ankle to knee, but supremely secure. So it was goblins. What are we going to do with them?
All of you are going to return to the surface with this one, while I head back to keep watch over the others. I'm not sure what they'll do if they wake to find their sentry missing, and...
She absent-mindedly brushes a hand through her hair.
It seems unkind, leaving them without someone on duty. Let's call it a professional courtesy.
She drapes the bound goblin over Fran's shoulder, then slips away, down the darkened passage.
The workshop has no high-backed chairs, so the goblin is sat on the floor and tethered to a heavy work stool. A dumb silence follows, broken by Gren only once he's sure the others would be content waiting for the goblin to wake on its own.
Dame Anise, would you please wake him?
The surgeon rattles to her senses. She begins to say she can't, but then recalls the workshop around her.
I suppose I could prepare a light stimulant with the materials here. May I?
Newton nods as he moves to a cabinet, ring of keys in hand.
After a few minutes digging around, Anise finds what she needs. She flicks a pinch of gray salt into a shallow dish of amber liquid. As the crystals dissolve, the air grows astringent. Kneeling, she moves the dish closer and closer to the goblin until he begins to stir. Good job, Doc.
Fran takes a knee next to Anise.
Hey, buddy. We found you knocked out in a cave. Rescued you from some ogre with bat wings. How are you feeling?
The goblin's awareness is still dim, and he looks unwell. His breathing is ragged, the skin around his eyes dark and heavy. Quite suddenly, he begins to thrash weakly, crying out for friends and family, for a return to the tunnels below. Though they're in a common tongue, the words are barely comprehensible, clouded as they are with panic. The goblin says that the others still sleep. They sleep in danger of being eaten.
The thrashing stops as Anise takes the poor creature by either side of its head. Her thin fingers press into the tender recess where the jaw and neck meet, just hard enough to focus his attention.
My friend is in those tunnels. I need you to tell me immediately what is down there.
Retribution sits on a low rock, just outside the light cast by the sleeping goblin's lantern. She works the tip of a heavy dagger carefully around a fingernail. Earlier in the day, she steadied herself on a wall and got a handful of mud and cave grime for her efforts. Looking at the goblin's heavy packs, light armor, pointy little spears, she wonders why they're equipped for war.
The goblin gang begins to wake. One of them sits up, rubbing her eyes. It's not long before she realizes they're missing someone. The arguments start right after and escalate quickly. One of them says they should straight away go back to camp. Another shoves him, calls him fish guts and dim, and says they can't leave poor Craig's body behind. A third crashes bodily into them both, bearing them to the ground. She tells them to keep quiet before they attract any unwanted attention. Fists and feet flail about as the three goblins lightly rough each other up, the fourth pantomiming a cheer nearby. They don't hear the something like stone popping behind them. They miss the second and third clicks too, and the quickening staccato run that follows after. Even as the source grows close and angry, the goblins remain oblivious. A curving spur of something pale and sharp as shattered porcelain pierces the dim lamplight. A second spur emerges, tapping softly against the stone wall. A beak hangs in the darkness between them, shorter, but no less sharp and cruel. Only now do the entangled goblins notice the bizarre, bladed creature, now, as it raises its arms with all the gravity of a guillotine. A flash of steel makes the small goblins flinch, and sends the beast staggering back. A heavy dagger seems to have sprouted from its collarbone.
Retribution charges, warhammer raised. She bellows a simple command. Move! The music for our intro was composed by Walker Williams. We have links to him and his work in the description. P&P Pals is adapted from a 5th edition D&D play-by-post campaign and has been dramatized for your enjoyment. This show is produced by Precarious at best and heard by you. See you again, Subterranean Traveler.